The Dutton family saga is one of the most compelling tales in television, not only for its intense characters and brutal conflicts, but for the way it captures something universal, the fight to preserve what you love, no matter the cost. At the heart of this story lies John Dutton, the unbreakable patriarch whose life has been dedicated to keeping the Yellowstone Ranch in his family, generation after generation. To him, this land is everything. It's more than soil and fences, more than cattle and horses. It's the very soul of his family, a place that holds their history and their future. But as the show progresses, it becomes clear that this obsession may lead to only one possible ending, a high price that no one, not even John, might be prepared to pay. John's journey has always been about loyalty to the land, to family, and to a sense of tradition that's disappearing in a world increasingly driven by greed and power. To hold on to the ranch, John has sacrificed almost everything, pushing away anyone who dares to threaten Yellowstone. He's fought land developers, corporate interests, and political forces that would see the Dutton family legacy erased for a quick profit. And in doing so, he's created a fortress around himself and his family, a place they protect with everything they have, knowing that if it falls, they lose not just their home, but a way of life that has defined them for generations. In John's mind, preserving the Yellowstone Ranch is about more than wealth or ownership. For him, it's a duty, a calling. His ancestors claimed this land, worked it, and passed it down to him, and he feels bound to do the same. This sense of responsibility drives him forward, even when the odds seem stacked against him. It's this unyielding resolve that has made John Dutton one of television's most unforgettable characters, a man as complex as the land he fights to protect. He is neither saint nor sinner, but a blend of both, capable of kindness and cruelty, loyalty and vengeance. But as the final season of Yellowstone unfolds, the cracks in John's world start to widen. Despite his best efforts, it becomes increasingly clear that his hold on the ranch and his family is slipping. The enemies he's made over the years are closing in, and even his own family is beginning to question the path he's chosen. John's children, each of whom has a different relationship with the land, begin to pull away from him, torn between their loyalty to their father and their own desires and ambitions. Beth, his fiercely loyal and ruthless daughter, is one of his strongest allies, but also one of his biggest sources of conflict. Beth's love for her father and the ranch is undeniable, but her methods of defending them are often as brutal and unforgiving as John's own. She's a character who lives in extremes, willing to do whatever it takes to protect her family, even if it means crossing moral lines. Beth's loyalty is fierce, but it's also fueled by a simmering rage at the world, at those who threaten her family, and perhaps most painfully, at her brother Jamie. Her hatred for Jamie, the adopted Dutton, who has often been at odds with the family, is a deep and complex wound that threatens to tear the family apart from within. Jamie, on the other hand, is the prodigal son, the one who doesn't quite fit into the world his father has created. He's a man torn between his loyalty to the family that raised him and his own ambitions. For Jamie, the Yellowstone Ranch represents both a promise and a prison, a place he loves, but also one he knows he can never truly call his own. John's distrust of Jamie has only grown over the years, and their relationship has deteriorated to the point where betrayal seems almost inevitable. Jamie's desperation to prove himself, to carve out a life of his own outside of John's shadow drives him to make choices that put him at odds with everything the Dutton family stands for. Casey, the youngest Dutton son, is perhaps the most conflicted of them all. As a former Navy SEAL, Casey has seen his share of violence and loss, and he longs for a life of peace and stability. But the pull of the ranch, the weight of his father's legacy, keeps him anchored to Yellowstone, even as he struggles to balance his role as a son, husband, and father. Casey's loyalty to his family is deep, but it's also complicated by his desire to protect his own wife and child from the darkness that seems to haunt the Duttons. He's a man caught between two worlds, torn between his duty to his father and his desire for a life free from violence and conflict. As each of John's children grapples with their own relationship to Yellowstone, the family's unity begins to fray. The ranch, once a symbol of strength and stability, becomes a source of tension and division. Each of them is pulled in a different direction, and John, the man who has held them all together, finds himself facing a future where his family may not stand by his side. It's a painful realization for John, one that forces him to confront the reality that his dream of passing Yellowstone down to his children may not come to pass. Yet, despite the mounting challenges, John refuses to back down. He's a man driven by a fierce determination, unwilling to let go of the land he's fought so hard to keep. But this unwavering commitment comes at a cost. The enemies he's made, from land developers to political adversaries, see see his stubbornness as an opportunity. They know that as long as John clings to Yellowstone, he is vulnerable. They exploit every weakness, every fracture within the family, knowing that if they can break the Duttons, they can claim the land. As John's enemies close in, the once powerful Dutton family finds itself surrounded on all sides. The stakes have never been higher, and the pressure is mounting. John's allies grow fewer by the day, and even those who remain loyal to him begin to question whether the fight is worth it. The weight of the legacy, the endless battles, and the sacrifices begin to take their toll on everyone involved. John may be willing to give everything to protect Yellowstone, but it's becoming clear that the cost may be too high for his family to bear. In this moment of crisis, John's own doubts start to surface. For all his strength and resolve, he's only human, and the years of fighting have left their mark. He starts to question whether his vision for Yellowstone is realistic, whether he's asking too much of his children. The land he's fought so hard to keep has become a burden, a weight that threatens to crush everyone under its immense pressure. John begins to see that holding on to Yellowstone may mean losing the very family he's tried so hard to protect. The Dutton family's story is one of tragedy, a story of people bound by love and loyalty, but also by pain and betrayal. The closer they get to the end, the more it becomes clear that there may be no happy ending for the Duttons. They are trapped in a cycle of violence and vengeance, a cycle that threatens to consume them all. John's dream of passing Yellowstone down to the next generation is slipping away, and the family's future looks darker than ever. In the end, Yellowstone isn't just a story about land, it's a story about legacy and the price of loyalty. John Dutton's fight to protect his family's heritage has pushed them all to the brink, and the question now is whether any of them will make it out alive. As the final chapter of this epic saga unfolds, it seems that the Dutton family is headed toward a reckoning, one that will force them to confront the choices they've made and the price they're willing to pay to keep Yellowstone. This is a story that can only end one way. The Dutton family, for all their strength and resilience, may not be able to withstand the weight of the legacy they've inherited. As the world around them changes, as old alliances crumble and new threats emerge, the Duttons must decide whether their loyalty to Yellowstone is worth the ultimate sacrifice. It's a question that has haunted them from the beginning, and as the final chapter unfolds, it's a question that will finally be answered. With John Dutton gone, the burden of his legacy falls squarely on his children, and each of them must decide where they stand. But there's one problem. No one truly agrees on what that legacy should mean. The Yellowstone Ranch has become a battleground, not just for land, but for values, beliefs, and identity. As the Duttons wrestle with their roles, loyalties, and betrayals, a clear question emerges. How far are they willing to go to protect something they don't even know if they still want? At the heart of this question is Beth, John's fiercely loyal but deeply scarred daughter. Beth has always seen herself as Yellowstone's ultimate defender, ready to take down anyone who threatens her family's legacy. But her loyalty isn't as simple as devotion. It's a complex blend of duty, guilt, and an intense desire to honor her father. Her hatred for Jamie is rooted not only in his perceived betrayal, but in her feeling that he represents everything wrong with the family, a weakness, a lack of resolve that Beth fears could destroy them. Beth's obsession with loyalty and revenge is what drives her to act as the family's enforcer. She's willing to get her hands dirty, even if it means alienating those around her, including her own brother Casey. Beth's love for her family and her need for retribution often blur together, making her motivations hard to separate. She sees herself as a protector, but there's a self-destructive edge to her actions. She's not just fighting for Yellowstone, she's fighting against the demons that haunt her past, the things she believes she has lost because of the choices others made. In this final season, Beth's vendetta against Jamie becomes a focal point, setting off a chain reaction of events that threatens to tear the Dutton family apart for good. Jamie's involvement with Sarah Atwood and market equities is, in Beth's eyes, the ultimate betrayal. To her, Jamie has sold out the family for his own ambitions, aligning himself with the very people who want to see Yellowstone destroyed. But in her pursuit of vengeance, Beth overlooks one crucial detail. Her father's death may not have been entirely Jamie's doing. There is a complexity to Jamie's character that makes him one of the most tragic figures in Yellowstone. As the adopted son, Jamie has always struggled to find his place within the family. He's been raised with all the privileges of a Dutton, yet he's never truly been one of them in Beth's eyes. His need for acceptance and validation has driven him to make choices that have placed him at odds with the family he so desperately wants to belong to. Jamie's alignment with market equities and his relationship with Sarah are, in many ways, a rebellion against the constraints his family has placed on him. Jamie's actions actions are rooted in a desire to prove himself, to show that he can be more than just a Dutton by name. He's aware that his loyalty to market equities could destroy his family, but he also sees it as a path to independence. For Jamie, breaking free from the Dutton legacy isn't just about survival. It's about defining himself outside the shadow of his father. But as he aligns himself with Sarah and the forces that want to dismantle Yellowstone, he realizes too late that he may have set in motion a series of events that will destroy everything he once valued. Beth's vendetta against Jamie reaches a fever pitch as she confronts him, forcing him to confront his own choices and loyalties. Beth's anger is more than just fury over her father's death. It's a culmination of years of resentment, a belief that Jamie has always been a threat to the family. She's convinced that Jamie's actions have not only put Yellowstone in jeopardy, but have also betrayed everything her father stood for. But in her pursuit of revenge, Beth risks becoming the very thing she despises, a person consumed by hatred, willing to destroy anyone who stands in her way, even if it's her own family. Casey, meanwhile, is caught in the crossfire, torn between his loyalty to the family and his desire for a simpler, peaceful life. Casey has always been the most conflicted of the Dutton children, drawn to the ranch and its legacy, but also haunted by the violence and darkness that comes with it. He's watched his family tear each other apart, and he's increasingly disillusioned with the lengths they're willing to go to protect Yellowstone. For Casey, the land is worth fighting for, but he's beginning to wonder if it's worth dying for. Casey's relationship with Monica and their son, Tate, adds another layer to his internal struggle. As a father and husband, Casey wants to protect his family from the conflicts that have plagued the Duttons for generations. But his loyalty to his father's legacy keeps pulling him back, anchoring him to a life he's not sure he wants. Casey's encounters with the wolves, a symbol of his connection to nature and the spiritual world, serve as a reminder of the path he could choose if he were willing to leave Yellowstone behind. But leaving isn't as simple as walking away. For Casey, abandoning Yellowstone feels like a betrayal, not just of his father's memory, but of the legacy he's been entrusted with. His loyalty to the ranch is complicated by his desire to protect his own family, and this conflict ultimately forces him to make a choice. He can either stay and fight, risking his own family's future, or he can walk away, leaving Yellowstone and the Dutton legacy to its fate. The tension between loyalty and survival reaches its peak as the Duttons realize that the forces aligned against them are stronger and more ruthless than ever. Market Equities, led by the cunning and relentless Sarah Atwood, has made it clear that they won't stop until Yellowstone is theirs. Sarah's manipulation of Jamie and her involvement in John's death reveal the lengths to which she's willing to go to achieve her goals. She sees the Duttons as an obstacle, a relic of the past that needs to be removed to make way for progress. But Sarah underestimates the Duttons' resilience and their willingness to fight for what they believe is rightfully theirs. The Duttons have faced countless threats over the years, but none have been as calculated and personal as the one Sarah presents. She knows how to exploit their weaknesses, how to manipulate them into turning against each other. In many ways, Sarah is the perfect antagonist for a family as fractured and conflicted as the Duttons. She embodies the thing they despise: greed, ambition, and a willingness to destroy anything that stands in the way of progress. As Beth, Jamie, and Casey grapple with their roles in the unfolding conflict, they begin to realize that the battle for Yellowstone is more than just a fight for land. It's a fight for their identity, for their place in a world that's changing faster than they can keep up with. Each of them must decide what Yellowstone means to them, whether it's worth sacrificing everything to protect, or if it's time to let go and move on. But letting go isn't easy, especially when the land represents so much more than just a place to live. It's a symbol of their family, their history, and their future. In the end, the Duttons' fight for Yellowstone is a reflection of their own internal battles, a struggle between loyalty and survival, between tradition and progress. The choices they make will define not only their own futures, but the future of the land they fought so hard to protect. As the final season unfolds, it becomes clear that there may be no happy ending for the Duttons. They are a family bound by blood, but also by conflict, and the legacy they've inherited may be too much for any of them to bear. This season's conflict isn't just with external forces, it's with themselves. The Duttons are each other's biggest threats, and paradoxically each other's only allies. They face a choice between unity and destruction, and with every decision the stakes grow higher. In Yellowstone's final season, there's a profound sense of inevitability hanging over the Dutton family. Each of them is pushed to their limits, struggling with choices they never wanted to make, but now must. And while they face external threats, the real battle comes from within. Their competing desires to protect the ranch, to honor John's legacy, to find peace, begin to tear them apart, just as their enemies close in. Beth's role in the family's fight for Yellowstone takes on new gravity in the aftermath of John's death. Her obsession with avenging her father blinds her to the damage she's causing around her. Her hatred for Jamie, which once seemed almost performative, now becomes lethal. It's not just personal resentment anymore. It's the belief that he represents the ultimate threat to Yellowstone. With Sarah Atwood manipulating Jamie into taking a stand against the family, Beth is ready to cross any line necessary to eliminate him. But Beth's aggression is also alienating her allies. Casey watches his sister's descent with growing concern, questioning how far she's willing to go in the name of justice. Even Rip, her husband, finds himself at odds with her determination to destroy Jamie. Rip has always been Beth's rock, her constant, but now he's caught between his loyalty to her and his sense of what's right. Rip is a man who knows when enough is enough, and he senses that Beth is spiraling out of control. He tries to reason with her, to remind her of what truly matters, but Beth is beyond reason. She's consumed by the need to destroy the person she sees as her father's murderer. In the middle of this escalating conflict is Jamie, who feels cornered and trapped, yet strangely empowered by Sarah's influence. She's told him that he's the rightful heir to the land, that John's passing represents a transfer of power from one generation to the next. Her words embolden him, pushing him to see Yellowstone as his own rather than something he has to protect for others. Jamie's relationship with Sarah has turned him into a pawn in a much larger game, but he's also starting to see himself as a king on the chessboard. He's ready to claim what he believes is rightfully his, even if it means facing off against his siblings. But Jamie's newfound resolve is shaky. Deep down, he's conflicted. He knows he's crossing lines he never thought he'd cross, aligning himself with forces that only want Yellowstone for profit. Jamie may crave power, but he also feels the weight of his father's legacy, a legacy that is fundamentally tied to the land and the values John tried to instill in his children. There's a part of Jamie that wonders if he's making the right choice, if the cost of winning this fight will be worth it. But Sarah's influence is powerful, and she's quick to remind him that power isn't something you wait for, it's something you take. Sarah Atwood represents a uniquely dangerous threat to Yellowstone. Unlike previous antagonists who sought the land for its resources or for their own personal vendettas, Sarah is calculating and pragmatic. She sees Yellowstone as a prize, but she's also willing to manipulate and destroy anyone who stands in her way to get it. Her relationship with Jamie is a tool, a means to an end, and she's not above using him to achieve her goals. Sarah's involvement in John's death makes her Yellowstone's most insidious villain yet. She doesn't just want to conquer the land, she wants to dismantle everything it stands for. She views the Dutton family as relics of a bygone era, and she's determined to erase them from the landscape. While Sarah's influence over Jamie grows, Beth sees her as the ultimate enemy. Beth's vendetta against Sarah is fueled not just by her father's death, but by a deep-seated hatred for what Sarah represents. A ruthless corporate machine with no respect for tradition or legacy. For Beth, Sarah isn't just an enemy. She's an existential threat to everything the Duttons hold dear. Beth's quest for vengeance becomes singularly focused on bringing Sarah down, no matter the cost. But there's a dark irony in Beth's pursuit of Sarah. As she obsesses over taking Sarah down, she risks becoming exactly what Sarah represents: ruthless, willing to sacrifice anything to win. Beth's methods become increasingly brutal, pushing her siblings and allies away. She doesn't see the damage she's causing, the way her actions are driving the family closer to the brink. Beth's refusal to back down becomes both her strength and her fatal flaw, a trait that could ultimately destroy her and everything she's fought to protect. In the meantime, Casey tries to find a path that preserves both his father's legacy and his own family's future. Torn between the Dutton legacy and his love for Monica and Tate, he begins to question what Yellowstone really means to him. For Casey, the ranch has always been a place of conflict, a land soaked in blood and violence. Yet, it's also his heritage, something he feels responsible for. Casey's encounters with the wolves are a constant reminder of his connection to the land, a symbol of his struggle to balance his family's legacy with his own needs. Casey's journey is one of self-discovery, a search for peace amid chaos. He wants to protect Yellowstone, but he doesn't want to lose himself in the process. Casey's love for his family and his desire for a simpler life pull him away from the conflict, yet he feels compelled to fight for what his father left behind. Casey's dilemma is perhaps the most tragic of all, as he struggles to reconcile his love for his family with his need to create a life separate from the violence and betrayal that define the Duttons. As Casey grapples with his choices, he becomes a stabilizing force in the family's unraveling. He's the one who can see beyond the immediate conflict, who understands the value of compromise and restraint. But Casey's attempts to mediate are often ignored, as his siblings are too caught up in their own agendas to listen. Beth and Jamie view him as weak, unwilling to do what's necessary to protect the family. But Casey knows that there are things worth more than land, things that can't be bought or sold. His perspective offers a glimmer of hope, a possibility that the Dutton legacy doesn't have to end in bloodshed. But Casey's desire for peace is not enough to halt the war raging around him. The alliances forming within the family are tenuous at best, and the distrust between Beth and Jamie threatens to tear them apart. Beth's vendetta against Jamie intensifies, and she begins to consider drastic measures to remove him from the picture entirely. For Beth, Jamie's betrayal is unforgivable, and she's willing to go to any length to protect what she sees as her rightful inheritance. Meanwhile, Jamie's relationship with Sarah deepens, and he begins to see her as his ticket to independence, a way to break free from the Dutton legacy and forge his own path. But Sarah's manipulation is dangerous, and Jamie's naivety leaves him vulnerable to her schemes. She encourages his ambition, feeding his desire for power, even as she keeps him firmly under her control. Jamie's alliance with Sarah puts him at odds with his family, but he's too blinded by his own ambitions to see the danger he's in. As the Duttons spiral further into chaos, the question of who will emerge victorious becomes increasingly uncertain. Each of them is fighting for control, but their motivations are wildly different. Beth wants to protect her father's legacy, even if it means sacrificing her own soul. Jamie wants power and independence, even if it means aligning himself with those who would destroy his family. And Casey wants peace, a life free from the violence and conflict that have defined the Dutton legacy. In the midst of this turmoil, one thing becomes clear. Yellowstone is not just a piece of land. It's a symbol of the Dutton family's identity, a place that represents their history, their values, and their future. As the final season unfolds, each of them must confront the question of what Yellowstone means to them and whether it's worth the sacrifices they've made. The alliances and betrayals within the family reflect the larger battle for the soul of the ranch, a struggle that will ultimately determine the fate of the Dutton legacy. But Yellowstone's legacy isn't something that can be neatly preserved or passed down. It's a living, breathing entity, shaped by the choices and sacrifices of those who call it home. And as the Duttons face the final showdown, they'll have to decide whether their loyalty to Yellowstone is worth the cost, or if it's time to let go and forge new paths for themselves. In the end, the fate of Yellowstone may hinge not on who wins, but on who is willing to walk away, to leave the past behind and embrace a future free from the conflicts that have defined their lives. This is the choice facing each of them: to stay and fight for a legacy that may no longer be theirs, or to leave and create new lives for themselves. In the climactic stretch of Yellowstone's final season, the Duttons are left with one ultimate choice: to protect their legacy or abandon it for the sake of peace. As the consequences of their actions reverberate, it becomes clear that the only way forward for each character might be to confront the brutal reality of their family's past and the future they're willing to fight for, or to let go of. With Beth set on eliminating Jamie, Casey longing for a peaceful life for his son, and Jamie embroiled in Sarah's manipulative schemes, each member of the family reaches a breaking point. The alliances they've formed are fracturing. Once motivated by family loyalty, each Dutton is now operating from a position of self-preservation. Beth's desire for revenge against Jamie and Sarah becomes an obsession, and she grows more desperate, alienating Casey and Rip along the way. For Beth, the fight for Yellowstone has always been personal, but her relentless drive now blinds her to the harm she's causing. In Beth's mind, the land is everything. It's her father's legacy, her birthright, the piece of her family that will live on after John's death. She sees herself as the last line of defense for Yellowstone, and her hatred for Jamie only fuels her resolve. Yet as she spirals further into her vendetta, even Rip begins to question her motives. Rip has always supported Beth, but he sees that her actions are pushing them further into a life defined by conflict and vengeance, one that leaves little room for anything else. Rip has come to value his life on the ranch, but he doesn't want it at the cost of his humanity or the people he loves. Meanwhile, Jamie finds himself increasingly trapped by his alliance with Sarah. At first, he believed that aligning with her was his ticket to freedom, his way of claiming the power he's always felt he deserved. But as Sarah's true intentions come to light, he begins to realize the depth of his mistake. Sarah isn't interested in preserving Yellowstone or even Jamie's legacy. She's interested in market equity's interests, using Jamie as a pawn to secure her own position. Jamie, who once thought of himself as Yellowstone's rightful heir, finds himself little more than a puppet in Sarah's game. For Jamie, this realization is devastating. His lifelong search for belonging and power has led him to betray the family he once swore to protect. Despite everything, Jamie's feelings for his family run deep, and the guilt he feels over his father's death begins to consume him. He starts to wonder if there's a way to make things right, a way to atone for his betrayal. But Jamie's path to redemption is unclear, especially with Beth gunning for his life. The more he struggles against Sarah's influence, the more he realizes that escaping her may mean sacrificing everything he's fought for. Casey, on the other hand, faces a choice that pulls him in a different direction. Unlike Beth and Jamie, who are both ensnared in their own ambitions, Casey longs for a simpler life, free from the cycles of violence that have plagued his family. He wants to protect his son, Tate, from the legacy of bloodshed that comes with being a Dutton. Casey's encounters with wolves, the recurring symbol of his connection to the land, serve as a reminder that there's a part of him that belongs to Yellowstone. Yet he knows that staying means exposing his family to the danger and betrayal that the Dutton name inevitably brings. As the season nears its conclusion, Casey's dilemma becomes the heart of Yellowstone's story. He embodies the question at the core of the Dutton legacy: is Yellowstone worth the cost? For Casey, the answer isn't easy. He's tied to the land in ways he can't fully escape, but he's also seen the toll that loyalty to the ranch has taken on his family. Casey begins to consider a future where Tate can inherit Yellowstone, but not the pain and conflict that have defined the Dutton name. He hopes to create a new legacy, one that honors the land without sacrificing his family's happiness. As tensions escalate, Beth, Jamie, and Casey come face to face with their differences, each making one final decision about what they're willing to sacrifice for Yellowstone. For Beth, the answer is clear. She's willing to sacrifice anything, including Jamie, to preserve her father's legacy. But her ruthlessness has pushed her to the brink, alienating the people she loves most. Her drive to protect Yellowstone has turned her into a mirror of the enemies she's fought against. And as the season draws to a close, Beth must confront the cost of her obsession. Jamie's journey is one of reckoning. Having betrayed his family and aligned himself with Sarah, he realizes too late that he's been manipulated into destroying everything he once held dear. As he watches Yellowstone slip through his fingers, Jamie is left to wonder if he's lost the chance for redemption. He's made his choice, and now he must live with the consequences. For Jamie, there's no going back. He's burned too many bridges, hurt too many people, and the legacy he once thought he could claim is beyond his reach. In the end, Yellowstone's final season hinges on these competing visions for the future. Beth's desire for vengeance, Jamie's craving for power, and Casey's hope for peace collide in a final showdown that will decide the fate of the Dutton legacy. As the Duttons confront one another, the land itself seems to reflect their turmoil, a wild, untamed expanse that has seen generations of conflict and struggle. Yellowstone is more than just a ranch. It's a symbol of the Duttons' resilience, their pride, and their downfall. Yet amid the chaos, there's a glimmer of hope. Casey's vision for a different kind of legacy, a legacy that honors Yellowstone without sacrificing everything for it, offers a way forward. His desire to protect his family, to give Tate a future that isn't defined by violence, represents the possibility of breaking free from the past. Casey's love for Yellowstone is rooted in respect for the land, not a desire for power. His journey is one of healing, of finding a way to hold on to Yellowstone without letting it consume him. As the dust settles, it becomes clear that the only way for the Duttons to truly honor Yellowstone is to let go of the battles that have defined them. The legacy they leave isn't one of blood and betrayal, but one of resilience and survival. Yellowstone may not end with the Duttons in control, but it will endure as a testament to their struggles and sacrifices. In the end, the land belongs to itself, a wild, untamed force that exists beyond the reach of any one family. For the Duttons, Yellowstone's final season is both an ending and a beginning. It's the conclusion of a story defined by conflict, but it's also the start of a new legacy, one that looks beyond the need for control. As they face the final moments on the ranch, each of them must confront what Yellowstone means to them, what they're willing to give up for it, and whether they're ready to walk away. In the final scene, as the Duttons stand on the land they fought so hard to protect, there's a sense of peace that settles over them. They may have lost the battle, but they've found a way to let go, to move forward, without the weight of the past holding them back. For the first time, they see Yellowstone not as a prize to be won, but as a legacy that exists beyond their control. It's a powerful reminder that the land is bigger than any one person, that Yellowstone will endure long after the Duttons are gone. And so, Yellowstone's final season closes not with a climactic victory, but with a quiet, profound acceptance. The Duttons may not have won, but they've found a way to make peace with the land and with each other. Their legacy isn't one of dominance or control, but of survival and resilience. In the end, Yellowstone stands as a testament to their journey, a symbol of the sacrifices they made and the land they loved.